So,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kelly. Just making sure your microphone is switched on and the red light is
Yes,
lit.
I think it is.
Excellent. So next topic is specific relevant policies in the adopted local plans, and I specifically want to look at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne West and the associated planning permissions. So if we start with Bourne Airfield, this is in the adopted South Cambridgeshire local plan CD 602, and the policy starts on PDF page 84.
Mr. Hopkin-Wright, so can I just interject before you start asking the questions?
Yes.
About it? If we go to Mr. Kelly's proof at 6.1, where you've got a list there, Mr. Kelly, in relation to the existing development plan. I just want to be clear about what you say the development plan comprises. It's at the beginning of the sentence you say it engages with the following development plan documents, but I'm not sure that they all are, and we want to understand exactly what the development plan comprises.
So the development plan, in my view, having regard to the Planning Act, is the Cambridge Local Plan 2018 and the South Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2018.
Yes. Obviously, we know the position concerning the last one, the MPPF. The others, I presume, they're simply supporting documents.
They are. Obviously, the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan is a transport plan, not a development plan document.
Yes.
And the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD is a SPD to
Yes.
the development plan, but it's not the development plan itself.
And are there any other documents that comprise the development plan? Not that we necessarily need to see them, I just want to be clear whether we're going to be saying the development plan comprises the Cambridge local plan and the South Cambridge local plan, or whether it includes those.
In my view, it comprises it.
Is there no minerals and waste plan, for example?
There is a minerals and waste plan for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough prepared by the County Council.
So that will be part of the development plan?
It is part of the wider development plan
Yes.
context, yes.
So there are other documents? But in other words, what you've identified are the relevant development plan
Yes.
documents? Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Perhaps if I could just draw attention to the words at the end of that sentence, transport strategy. So I don't think the intention was to set out all the development plan documents, but to highlight some transport strategy documents as well. Okay, so turning then to CD 602 and the policy SS7 on Bourne Airfield, which starts on page 84.
Yes.
And if we scroll down to the specific measures on the creation of a comprehensive movement network on page 86, that's point 8. And we see there point 8A, significant improvements in public transport required, including provision of a segregated bus link from Cambourne to Bourne Airfield and on through the development to the junction of the St Neots Road with Highfields Road. Any measures necessary to ensure that a bus journey between Caldecott Highfields and the junction of the A428 and the A1303 is direct and unaffected by any congestion suffered by general traffic. And then thirdly, the provision of high quality bus priority measures or busway on or parallel to the A1303. And I just wanted to get your view on the justification for including these requirements in this policy when the local plan was developed.
They reflect both the objectives set out in the local transport plan or the 2014 local transport plan, but also the evidence-based work that underpinned the 2018 local plan in terms of the need to effect a mode shift.
And if we could then take up the decision that granted planning permission for development at Bourne Airfield, that's CD 406.
Yes.
And if you just go first of all to PDF page 38, whose signature is on that page?
That's mine.
And can you explain your involvement in the determination of this application?
So the application was submitted. some time before determination, and through 2020 and so forth, there was quite extensive engagement with the applicants, particularly in relation to transport. I was part of that discussion. It was a major strategic site, and it was important to the delivery of the council and the local plan process. So I obviously wasn't the planning case officer, but I liaised closely with the planning case officer and the strategic sites manager in the evolution of the assessment and in the consideration of the representations prior to making a recommendation in my name to the planning committee. Subsequent to the planning committee resolution, there was then a further period of engagement, including resolution of the water-related issues that stayed the issue of a decision, and I was closely involved in that process, leading up to my decision to issue the planning permission at the point that that had been resolved in July 2024.
And then if we could go back to PDF page 5, the description of development. There, just halfway down the description, that main paragraph on the first page, you see, including principal eastern access from the roundabout on St Neots Road and western access with Broadway, including first section of strategic public transport route. What is meant by strategic public transport route? What is that referring to?
The planning application incorporated a specific transit route within the site that was a part of the wider strategic transport corridor represented by the Cambourne to Cambridge busway.
And how important was that strategic public transport route to the determination of this application?
Well, it was that the ability to deliver a mode shift was a significant component of the assessment of the planning merits of the case and their mitigation. Transport matters formed a key component of local communities' objections to the proposals, based on concerns about rat running, particularly to the south, through the villages of Highfield, Caldecott and Bourne. And a significant amount of time was therefore spent engaging with those communities on the right, on transport modelling and the right way to assess the transport effects of the scheme. But the transport assessment incorporated consideration of the Cambourne to Cambridge project as a key mitigation in the acceptability of the proposals.
And then if we just have a look at the condition, which we've all become quite familiar with in the course of these proceedings, condition 13 on PDF page 13, which is headed transport of 500 dwellings limit. And we've looked at it already in this inquiry. You can see what it says there. Just wanted to draw your attention to the reason as well for the imposition of the condition, to ensure that the development is founded on the provision of significant improvements to public transport provision in accordance with policy SS7 8A, which we've obviously already looked at. Could you explain for the benefit of the inspectors the history behind the imposition of this condition on the planning permission?
Certainly. When the application was originally submitted, the view of the County Council was that no development should take place until the Cambourne to Cambridge busway was completed.
Sorry, I missed that. Did you say no development?
No development. They initially objected to the proposals on the basis of the trip rates that were proposed to be then heading eastwards towards the city. There was a significant amount of engagement with the applicants and their consultants, Mayor Brown, who sought through a series of mitigation measures to reach agreement on a number of homes that could be built and accommodated within the existing infrastructure between the city and the site, without adversely impacting and increasing rat running between in the villages to the south. So in other words, because of levels of congestion that were anticipated and formed a central part of the concerns of the local community, there was a sense to which vehicles would leave Bourne Airfield development and then, instead of travel eastwards towards the city, would seek to disperse through the local villages in an attempt to avoid that congestion on their journey either to the M11 or towards other locations in the city. That resulted in a mitigation strategy being put forwards, which includes a range of particular measures comprising the development of a cycleway alongside Cambridge Road, the provision of financial contributions and a monitoring regime to facilitate the installation of traffic calming measures on surrounding roads to mitigate or diminish the attractiveness of those alternative routes, interventions in terms of traffic controls on Cambridge Road towards the city on the 1307, down Madingley Hill, and measures to change the relationship between the bus lane over the M11 bridge and the traffic signals to facilitate 2 lanes of vehicle stacking at the M11 junction. Following and on top of that, a series of bus subsidies to increase the frequency of services, free bus passes to all new occupants of the homes, and the establishment of an on-site car club from the first occupancy. So that package of measures resulted in the County Council revising its position to a 500 dwelling limit in comparison with their objection to any dwellings proceeding before the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme was implemented. In that period, it took about 6 or 7 months to go through that process. You will notice that the officer report, and I've heard reference, I think it was Mr. Lee who referred to the officer report, including this 500 home limit or provisions for agreement to depart from that with appropriate evidence. It's probably important for this inquiry to note that the Local Planning Authority's Planning Committee considered specifically Condition 13 in the assessment of the planning application and determined as the Planning Committee to delete the facility, to agree through in writing or through some form of submission within that planning condition to the variance of that condition and the number of dwellings within it. So essentially, the committee departed from the officer recommendation, and I think you can see in the planning decision that the second limb of the officer report is not carried through in the decision notice condition 13 that you see in front of you. And that was a reflection of the strength of the local community's concerns about the variation or the ability to vary this planning condition on their amenity and community impacts.
And on the point about variation or removal of this condition, there's obviously been quite a lot of discussion already at this inquiry regarding a potential Section 73 application in relation to this condition. So noting the history of the imposition of the condition, as you've just explained, the reason which refers explicitly to policy SS7 and the wording of policy SS7 that we've already looked at, how likely in your view is it that on a Section 73 application this condition would be removed from the planning permission?
I think one can't say that there is no way in which that condition could be varied. Clearly, any application under Section 73 would need to include up-to-date position at the time of the application on trip rates and an assessment of the impact on of the whatever the elevated figure might be upon transport and road conditions in the locality. But my reference to the committee report and the committee's decision is merely to, and indeed the existing package of mitigation, is that there is already a comprehensive set of measures aimed at not only driving down trips from Bourne Airfield, but also supporting the mode shift from Cambourne. That amounts to a comprehensive interim set of measures deemed necessary by the Highway Authority on the back of the transport modelling to realise this permission for 500 units to take place in advance of the Cambourne to Cambridge. If further evidence were submitted, I expect rigorous examination from the communities that fought very hard for this condition to be imposed, a thorough assessment from the Highway Authority, who likewise spent 6 or so months negotiating a package of measures to achieve a reduction in the trip rates associated with these dwellings coming forwards, and clearly a decision by the Planning Committee on the respective merits of that. So it is, I would say, I've seen a number of commentators suggest this is a straightforward condition to lift. My view is there is a substantial amount of evidence that would be required to enable the local planning authority to remove this condition. I think is unlikely, but to vary this condition and be confident that it had quantified both the environmental and transport effects of doing so.
And if we go back to how you deal with this in your main proof of evidence at paragraph 6.5, on page 28, you say there that the scheme is essential for releasing the full capacity of the Bourne Airfield site. Is there any change? Have you had any change to this view since your proof of evidence has been submitted, or on the basis of the evidence that you've heard before this inquiry?
No.
Okay, now if we could turn to Cambourne West on PDF page 90 of CD 602, policy SS8.
Sorry, can you just repeat the reference number?
CD 602. Going back to the local plan that we were looking at earlier. And the policy starts on page 90, but again, we'll need to scroll down to the accessibility section, the access section, which is on page 92, point 12 of the policy, which requires development to provide for additional travel demands generated, and it will need to address, but it's not limited to, the following, subject to detailed strategy development and transport assessment. And then we see there again measures necessary to ensure that a bus journey between Cambourne West and the junction of the A428 and A1303 is direct and unaffected by any congestion suffered by general traffic, and high-quality segregated bus priority measures on the A1303 between its junction with the A428 and Queen's Road, Cambridge. So again, just like to have your view on the justification for including these points in this policy.
Well, I think I may well have covered this earlier, but I certainly think the Cambourne, it emphasises the significance of the Cambourne to Cambridge link, a project within the growth strategy. As I highlighted earlier, the consideration of the planning application for Cambourne West, which is obviously in excess of this scheme, spent some time exploring the matters associated with high-quality public transport connections to the city, and included contributions to the Section 106 agreement to facilitate the delivery of that link. So in my view, the policy is consistent with the objectives of this scheme and would satisfy the scheme would satisfy this policy objective.
And you make reference to that planning application. Can you again explain your role, as you did with Bourne Airfield, in determining the application for Cambourne West?
Well, at the time, I oversaw the team that was processing this application, and obviously, through my oversight of that team, was involved in the discussions over the overall planning balance and the framing of the recommendation to the planning committee, which they accepted on the need for the scheme to be approved.
And then if we could take up the Section 106 agreement associated with this planning application, which is at CD 408. And Schedule 4, which starts on page 74.
Just waiting for it to load.
Can I have the page number again?
74, which is Schedule 4.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's taking
Yep.
some time to load at the moment.
It's a scan, so it may be a large document.
Did you say 74?
Page 74. Yeah, I'm just going to Schedule 4 just to highlight that these are the county council obligations.
Oh, I see.
And then we'll obviously have to go down to Section C,
Yes,
which is halfway down on page 80.
yes.
But we see obviously that these are the county council obligations. So the county council as the highway authority, did they request these obligations, or were these requested by the local planning authority or somebody else?
They were by the highway authority.
And we know obviously that they could only have been taken into account by the local planning authority as a reason for granting planning permission if they were considered to make the development acceptable in planning terms. The law tells us that. But if we just have a look at the specific obligations, first of all, we see, and the first three are relevant, the Broadway bus link,
Yes.
which relates to Stirling, the connection between Stirling Way and the Broadway. And could you just explain the purpose of this, including this obligation in the Section 106?
Well, the specific purpose of this linkage was to remove the current scenario that exists when buses enter Cambourne, which is that they then have to turn back when they're serving Upper Cambourne. They have to return back to the main dumbbell roundabout that is just outside this site in order to then head back eastbound. So they go westwards, which is away from Cambridge, travel back through Cambourne and then return back eastwards. And that introduces something like a 7-minute modelled increase in journey time compared with the ability to continue their journey eastwards and onto the Broadway, and having regard to the development plan through the Bourne Airfield development through this linkage. And that was in the committee report, that was considered to be a substantial improvement to the attractiveness of public transport in comparison with the existing proposition.
And why was this obligation considered necessary to make the development acceptable? You may have just answered that question, but...
Because the objectives of the local plan, albeit in draft form at that time, but the objectives of the transport strategy, which had obviously been adopted in 2015, were to facilitate this higher quality public transport journey into the city from these new settlements, consistent with the modelled need to promote a mode share away from private car use, given at that time the clear evidence of substantial delays on the Madingley-Mulch to M11 stretch particularly.
And we saw in the Bourne Airfield planning permission, this is referred to as the first part of a strategic public transport infrastructure link. What is the relationship of this obligation regarding the Broadway bus link to the C2C scheme?
So this bus link facilitates the penetration of the C2C scheme into the settlement of Cambourne. So rather than having to pass along the outside of the site and return back into Cambourne, it allows a continuation of the Cambourne to Cambridge link into Cambourne and then onwards potentially to other destinations. Obviously in the work that we've done, we've suggested onwards into Cambourne North. But it's a central part of connecting this end of the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme into Cambridge.
And then if we move down to obligation 2, on page 82, the funding for the City Deal project.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we see here a sum to be paid in a number of instalments, which are related to dwelling occupation dates. Could you explain, first of all, the purpose of this obligation?
So this, recognising the impact of the development on the transport network and therefore the need to mitigate the effects of the development by securing and supporting infrastructure that achieves the mode shift objectives. This is a phased suite of contributions through the life of the development to help contribute towards the cost of the City Deal project as described there, but the Cambourne to Cambridge project. And that's on the back of the expectations of the City Deal programme that the £500 million funding from government to forward fund that infrastructure would be complemented by appropriate and necessary contributions to mitigate the effects of the development that it unlocked.
And just to round that off, why was this obligation considered necessary to make the development acceptable?
Because as I've said, because the fundamental transport strategy underpinning the allocation of Cambourne West, but in fact this development, which was of even greater significance in terms of the numbers of homes, the local plan this was 2,350 homes. The local plan actually envisaged, I think, 1,200 homes to the west of Cambourne, but it was a necessary mitigation for the transport effects that rely upon a mode shift away from private car use in order to facilitate the reduction in congestion within the city. So in other words, stopping those trips from starting from destinations outside the city, but also to facilitate the very particular challenges that are faced on the corridor into the city through, particularly from Madingley Mulch down to the city itself.
And if you were able to, are you able to shed some light on the instalments and why the sort of phased approach was taken here and the trigger dates?
So the reason for the phasing of the instalments was that the development viability appraisal submitted for Cambourne West illustrated marginal viability to the extent that, in fact, the affordable housing levels were not able to be realised in line with the local plan. The local plan set a target of 40% affordable housing. The actual levels of affordable housing for this for Cambourne West are 30%, 30. And when we were considering the negotiation of the Section 106 agreements, obviously one of the things that one has to do with our viability consultants is consider how the cash flow for these developments works, and other infrastructure obligations related to, for example, primary school provision, education provision, and so forth. And they all introduce costs through the phasings of a development, such that the approach of the local planning authority and the county council as a key delivery partner was to try and manage the phasing of those contributions in a way that would optimise the outcomes, particularly with regard to affordable housing, but also with respect to the delivery of other infrastructure early in the programmes around schools and so forth. what tends to happen otherwise is that if one loads all of the contributions at the very beginning of the scheme, as I said earlier in my evidence, oftentimes these large strategic developments, because of the upfront infrastructure costs, don't actually produce a positive return for the developer until quite late in the development's build out. That means that all of that infrastructure costs, if you seek them on day one, have to be delivered by way of borrowing, and the costs of that borrowing impact the viability of the scheme. So it's quite routine and ordinary that what one does is phase the payment of various contributions to the kind of returns that you can get by building out the scheme in order to be able to maximise the balance between infrastructure and elements of the development like the affordable homes. So this phasing was agreed of these payments and was deemed to be particularly within the life of the City Deal programme in terms of the repayment profile. So that the role of the City Deal was to forward fund the infrastructure and the developer would proportionally and appropriately pay back that forward funding at the points in the process when the scheme was able to do so.
And then the third relevant obligation is number 3, works to improve bus routes within the site and between the site and Stirling Way to the Broadway bus link. So again, could you briefly explain the purpose of this obligation?
The objective of this was fundamentally to make sure that high-quality public transport corridor that the busway was representing could be wired into the local network so that, again, the scheme was designed to optimise people's use of this piece of public transport infrastructure through associated access routes, and certainly in the design code and in the parameter plans for the scheme, there is a network that is set out which aims to incorporate these objectives.
And why was this obligation considered necessary to make the development acceptable?
Because once again, as I commented, the objective here is to minimise private vehicle trips emerging from this development and to optimise and make and enhance the attractiveness of public transport, particularly bus use, as a means to access services outside of Cambourne and within Cambourne.
And then if we just go down to paragraph 3.3, we see their reference to, that's on page 83, providing a two-way bus route through the development to facilitate efficient bus services as part of the Cambourne to Cambridge Better Buses scheme. Having regard to that, could you just explain the relationship of this obligation to the C2C scheme?
Well, it is to facilitate the optimised outcomes through that scheme by making sure this development engages fully with the capabilities that the scheme brings forward for public transport.
And the CPPF and Coton Parish Council have queried the dependency of development at Cambourne West on the scheme on the basis that the development is not prevented from coming forward through, for example, a condition restricting development as at Bourne Airfield. You've already discussed with the inspectors the differing approaches taken. But having regard to the timeline for build-out at Cambourne West, and you've also mentioned the City Deal and that forward funding approach, what was the planning authority's view when it was determining this application on whether the necessary public transport improvements along the corridor were likely to be implemented in line with the triggers, the phased payments for that are set in the Section 106 agreement?
There was a clear expectation that the Cambourne to Cambridge project would be advanced. The City Deal had just been established. There was a very clear commitment in the establishment of the City Deal to implement the transport strategy, and the City Deal board had begun work on the development of all of the public transport corridor schemes to secure the delivery of that strategy at the time of the application's determination, which was in January 2017. So there was a momentum behind the delivery of the transport strategy, and the projects contained within it, freshly energised by the completion and the standing up of the, as it was the City deal, but subsequently has evolved into the Greater Cambridge Partnership organisation.
And having regard to the trigger points we've discussed, and also the fact that Section 106 obligations must be necessary to make the development acceptable in order to be a reason for granting planning permission, you've already dealt with this with the inspectors briefly, but can you assist the inquiry as to the Council's view on whether the delivery of C2C of the scheme is necessary to facilitate sustainable development at Cambourne West?
There's clearly the test of the need for obligations, which makes a very clear connection, and the Council was conscious of that, particularly in the context of a financially pressured development. As I said, there had to be a viability appraisal, and there was a very clear commitment from the planning authority and the county council that the investment in that infrastructure was essential in order to be able to facilitate the development from coming forwards. But there was also, I think from the planning authority's perspective, and refreshing my memory on the committee report that I oversaw, there is considerable discussion around the role that the Cambourne to Cambridge route plays in ensuring that Cambourne West, as an expansion of the existing settlement of Cambourne, would continue to support the reduction in private vehicle trips as a proportion of all trips on that critical journey into the city. So there was an expectation from the planning authority that Cambourne to Cambridge would form an integral part of the measures overall that would deliver a high quality extension to Cambourne as a settlement.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next topic then, which is the specific relevant policies in the emerging local plan. So these are in CD 2971-4, and they're also discussed in sections 3 and 4 of your supplementary proof of evidence. And we'll start with the Cambourne North and Cambourne policies, which are at PDF page 5 of 2971-4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in terms of Cambourne North, we see at paragraph 3.3.4, this is a new strategic site which sets out the proposed approach to the further expansion of Cambourne, taking into account of the significant planned improvements to public transport. And it's noted in the following paragraph that expansion will be developed during the period of the new local plan and beyond.
Yes.
And we see the content of the expansion, point 1 of the policy box in terms of the quantity of homes, 13,108 square metres of employment space, and point 3 then, vision and identity, refers to the new railway station and also the Cambourne to Cambridge guided busway, through which Cambourne will become a destination in its own right, with facilities and open spaces of sub-regional significance. And if we then look at the movement section on PDF page 12, and scroll down to point 38, which is actually on the next page, 13, that refers to improvements to public transport and says they must include integration of the new east-west rail station and of the Cambourne to Cambridge busway. So bearing that in mind, how have East-West Rail and the C2C busway informed the development of the policy for Cambourne North?
Well, the premise, you'll recall when we were discussing this morning the spatial priorities and the sequence of future development, Cambourne is singled out specifically as a location which will have, because of East-West Rail, the 428, A428 enhancements, and Cambourne to Cambridge as having very high quality, very high levels of accessibility. The Cambourne to Cambridge scheme is seen as as part of the foundations of the delivery of this additional growth, because the modelling that we've undertaken for the local plan makes clear that ambitious mode shift targets need to be a part of the development strategy, and if we are to be able to accommodate the levels of growth that we're seeing. Now, there are two threads to this. The first is that obviously the size of Cambourne as a place will increase, such that movement within the town becomes important, and therefore the role of Cambourne to Cambridge and East West Rail is not just about movement from Cambridge to Cambourne, but also the facilitation of public transport movement within Cambourne by ensuring that a journey conceived of by public transport from door to door can include movement networks within the town as well. So we've built the assumption that Cambourne North is realisable on the premise that Cambourne to Cambridge takes place, as does East West Rail. And indeed, the integration strategy that we've produced, which is one of the core documents, tends to illustrate the potential population catchment that Cambourne North and therefore Cambourne to Cambridge busway can benefit from.
Yeah, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. But you mentioned both East West Rail and C2C, and how important, in your view, is it that both of these infrastructure schemes are delivered in order to realise the planned strategy, as opposed to one or the other of the two?
The modelling work that we've undertaken says that both are essential components of that allocation.
Okay, and then if we could go down to the policy on Cambourne on page 24, PDF page 24 of this part of the emerging local plan.
Yes.
And under the heading what this policy does, the paragraph 3.3.24, it states it provides a consistent planning framework for managing new applications of development within the town in the context of the new strategic allocation for expansion at Cambourne North that we've already looked at, and seeks to ensure that development within the existing town and expansion area are well integrated and serve the needs of existing and future communities. Again, if we could scroll down to the movement section, in the context of Cambourne West, that's on page 27, point 10 of the policy. Sorry, point 12 of the policy. And as we've seen with the adopted local plans, point 12A requires making on-street provision for any possible expansion of the Cambourne to Cambridge guided busway and including measures to ensure that bus journey between Cambourne West and the junction is direct and unaffected by any congestion suffered by general traffic. And then point B, providing high quality segregated bus priority measures, so very similar to the adopted local plan policy. And then if we go down to the movement section for Cambourne Town Centre on page 32, point 44, it starts on page 41. We're looking at point 44E on page 32. That refers there to providing or contributing towards enhancements in public transport that deliver improved connections within Cambourne and to nearby settlements and maximise the benefits of proposed new infrastructure, such as the C2C public transport corridor. So again, what is your view on the importance of the C2C scheme for delivering the visions and aim of this policy with regard to Cambourne?
The numerous references to which you've referred make clear that this strategy and indeed the adopted development plan place great weight on the delivery of this piece of infrastructure, the Cambourne to Cambridge link, alongside other potentially complementary pieces of infrastructure like East West Rail, at a point when that may well become confirmed as a scheme. At the moment, obviously, of course, it's got funding to progress it, but it's not yet a confirmed scheme.
And you've mentioned a bit about the importance of integrating this development as a place and the increased importance of internal trips. So in your view, what contribution, if any, does the C2C scheme make to ensuring that Cambourne and an expanded Cambourne North function well as a place?
Well, there's several layers to that. The plan has got 4 themes, including climate change, but also an important theme about well-being that we've touched upon briefly. The ability of everybody, resident of Cambourne currently and in the future, to be able to take advantage, whether they drive a private car or not, of the opportunities in the city of Cambridge, but also to be able to see a future in which they do not need to own a car and can live in Cambourne. And it's as an expanded settlement is important, both from the perspectives of social equity, but also from the point of view of the climate, the planet, and indeed the importance that the economy of Greater Cambridge is able to draw upon all its citizens rather than necessarily just those who own cars.
Okay, then I would like to take up the busway integration report, which you discuss at paragraphs 4.7 of your supplementary proof of evidence on page 13, and it's at CD 2971-1.
Sorry, just a second. Yes.
Yes, so in terms of the purpose of this report, which the Inspector asked to be advised on, you explain this in 4.7 of your proof of evidence, that it was commissioned by the councils as part of the evidence base for the local plan to examine how the existing guided busway network could be extended to support the expanded Cambourne and Cambridge North proposals. So just to look at how that's dealt with in this document, we could turn first to page 3, PDF page 3.
Yes.
We see there that Cambourne's set to become the 3rd largest community in the combined authority area, that high quality public transport will be essential to supporting this growth, and that the proposed C2C busway will play a vital role in connecting both existing and future development to key destinations in Cambourne and Cambridge. But the full benefits of the busway will only be realised if it's fully integrated with the form and function of the evolving settlement. Then if we go down to page 5, this is describing the existing C2C proposals, and that notes under the bullet points, a busway at this location builds on the success of the other busways serving Cambridge, both in supporting growth and providing alternative sustainable choices to driving between Cambourne and Cambridge. If we go to page 7, that refers to some of the modelling undertaken, the second paragraph on page 7, in relation to existing network constraints and trip budgets. And that says that strategic highway modelling undertaken by the County Council has identified that due to current network constraints, growth at Cambourne will be subject to a vehicular trip budget, effectively placing an upper limit on the volume of vehicular traffic that can be generated. And to support sustainable growth, Cambourne's spatial and transport strategies must be tightly integrated, prioritising mode shift, and a key enabler of development is the delivery of the C2C busway. Yes. And then it refers to extending that into extended Cambourne and integration with East West Rail in the third paragraph. So having regard to this busway report, again, how has the scheme informed the emerging local plans proposals for Cambourne and Cambourne North?
Well, as you can see from this report, the local planning authority has taken seriously the potential opportunity provided by the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme as presented to this examination to facilitate the delivery of this substantial growth project, having regard to the need to adopt a trip budget approach for the accommodation of the as part of the transport strategy. further in the document, you can see how one of the things we were seeking to understand is the extent to which the utilising the Cambourne to Cambridge busway, we could see bus-based travel forming an important part of the future settlement trips. And on pages, just bear with me a second, without being definitive, there were a series of scenarios explored on pages 20, PDF pages 22, that sought to identify the potential catchment of the within North Cambridge and Cambourne, North Cambourne and Cambourne, the potential population that may well fall within a catchment area for that busway, so that we could think carefully about the design and layout of the North Cambourne new town to maximise the opportunity provided by the busway to secure that mode shift.
And if you go to some of those options, just by way of example, in the next, perhaps just look at the next 2 or 3 pages, routes N, O and P, just have a look at the levels of population capture in the tables on those pages in terms of the future population with...
Which pages are you going
So if we start with page 23, and just looking at the text above the table, we can see there approximately 17,500 people will live within 400 metres of this route once North Cambourne is developed. And just have a look as well at the similar conclusion on the subsequent 2 pages in relation to route O and P. Again, we're looking at 20,000 people, 25,000 people. Having regard to the anticipated population numbers here that would be within a close proximity of the scheme, the extended scheme, what implications does this have, in your view, for the potential pool of passengers for the scheme in the future?
I mean, I think what it illustrates, and clearly there are a range of scenarios, so one can't double count by just adding up the numbers. But I think what we were very keen to do, and is consistent with the spatial objectives that we've highlighted in both the adopted plans and the future plans, is to ensure that an allocation of the magnitude of Cambourne North, and indeed the policy framework that emerges, doubles down and takes maximum advantage of a piece of infrastructure like Cambourne to Cambridge in order to be able to facilitate sustainable travel modes. And within, this is a kind of, we haven't fully designed the layout of Cambourne North by any stretch, and we've got to go through the consultation process. But what we were seeking to illustrate is that against a backdrop of constrained capacity, not just on the corridors to the city, but within the city, there was an ability for a piece of infrastructure like the Cambourne to Cambridge project to capture a very significant proportion of the additional and existing population that exists at this end of the busway proposals, and in the right format to be able to therefore drive towards a substantial increase in the number of passengers that, or trips that utilised the busway as opposed to private car use, on the basis of its convenience to existing and new housing at this end of the corridor.
And if we could then just finally turn to the key recommendations on page 32 of this document, and in particular the second recommendation in relation to complementing the EWR opportunity on the right-hand side. And first bullet, second sentence, once operational, the busway and East-West Rail will serve different locations within Cambridge, and a combination of both East-West Rail and the C2C busway are required to provide the sustainable transport options to support and facilitate sustainable growth. So we've heard from some objectors to the inquiry that East-West Rail will make the C2C scheme obsolete, or that the scheme and East-West Rail are not complementary. Having regard to the role of East-West Rail and the scheme as referred to, both in the Cambourne North and Cambourne policies we've already looked at and in this integration report. What's your response to those objections?
Well, I don't agree with those conclusions. Affecting behaviour change so that people make choices about where they live and assume an ability to be able to satisfy their needs through public transport is not about a particular singular journey. It's about the way that a town or a settlement provides a range of public transport choices depending upon what the purpose of your trip may be. The important thing, I think, is that any range of trips and purposes can be provided by public transport solutions. And so, for example, it isn't just my trip to work that determines whether I have a car or not and whether I choose to use it. It's the availability of my trip to leisure or to other destinations, for school, for recreation, and the complementarity of Cambourne to Cambridge and East West Rail is that both of those corridors, both of those transport infrastructures enable people to live in Cambourne without necessarily needing to own a car. And that plays back through the policies for the site allocation itself that seeks to ensure an integral, active and public transport network for the settlement, and it supports a kind of joint transport strategy which includes the ability to access heavy rail or to be able to take a local bus trip to see friends in Bourne or travel to the West Cambridge hub for a coffee and so forth. It's not solely about a singular journey, and I think that's central to a strategy of trying to allow people to live without a private vehicle, or indeed to substantially review whether, for example, they have two cars instead of one car.
Then just dealing briefly with Bourne Airfield and West Cambridge, which you refer to at paragraphs 4.8 and 4.9 of your supplementary proof. I'm not going to ask you to go to these in the emerging local plan, but you note there that these allocations continue to be allocated under policy SBA and SWC, and just wanted your view on to what extent there's any difference in the approach to these sites in the new version of the emerging local plan by comparison with the first proposal's previous version of the emerging local plan.
No, other than, in a sense, the continuing emphasis of interconnectivity between them being an important part of their future success.
And on the West Cambridge allocation, some objectors have sought to suggest that this isn't an important site for employment by comparison, for example, with the biomedical campus. It's not identified, for example, as a main centre of employment by the Coton Busway Action Group in their proof of evidence. In your view, having regard to the grant of planning permission at West Cambridge and the allocations in the emerging and adopted local plans, how important is West Cambridge as an employment destination for Cambridge, both now and in the future?
I think West Cambridge is one of the most important sites in Cambridgeshire. The site, it's fair to say that it's taken some time to consent it, but as far as the University of Cambridge are concerned, it is a fundamental part of their strategy for academic excellence and commercial partnerships to translate growth, ideas and science into reality. And by reference to that, in the last 5 years, the university have invested more than £500 million in best-of-class academic buildings, and that includes the Ray Dolby Centre, which is over a £300 million investment opening recently, accommodates 30 Nobel Prizes, the Cavendish Laboratory, so it's got a reputation for international excellence. There is the Cambridge West Hub, which has opened 2 years ago, which is a shared space but an interface between commercial and academic interests, and the Whittle Laboratory, which is undergoing redevelopment at this moment in time, but is a partnership on advanced propulsion and aviation technology, including partnerships with Rolls-Royce. So that's the existing campus. There is a further investment underway, they advise me, in which the engineering department will complete its relocation from the centre of Cambridge to that site. The site is the home to Cambridge Enterprise, sorry I couldn't remember their name, who are effectively the financial and commercialisation wing of the University of Cambridge. They're based on the West Cambridge campus. And there is a further academic investment being explored at the moment to commence development on the Western campus of circa 200,000 square feet. That's an active project that they're currently pursuing. So the West Cambridge campus may well have been held up by uncertainties about water for some time, but it is inevitably a central part of the Cambridge ecosystem and likely to increase in the significance of its role, both as a place for employment, but importantly as a place for the Cambridge innovation ecosystem as we go forwards. So I don't think it's right to describe its current standing, although as I have said, £500 million has been invested in that site recently, as a reflection of its capabilities and its contribution within the local plan timeframe to Cambridge economy.
And Mr. Littlewood comments on this in his note, responding to Mr. Sensicle's note. That's at CD 2968, if you could take that up.
Sure.
And that's paragraph 3 on page 2.
Yep.
And he refers there to the main sites identified for future housing in the Cambridge area not being located to the west of Cambridge, and identifies a number of other sites which would not be served by the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme and the number of units associated with those sites. And is there any comment you'd like to make on what he says here in this paragraph, having regard to the policies that we've looked at in the new Regulation 18 emerging plan, including the proposals for an expanded Cambourne?
Paragraph 3.
Yes. So having,
I mean, I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Littlewood's conclusions. I think that as we see, for example, the Cavendish Laboratory realise its full potential, as we see build out on the West Cambridge campus, the university estimate that the jobs on that campus will rise to 14,000. That is a significant attractor of trips, and both from across the city, but also from the west. And likewise, I referred earlier to developments on Bourne Quarter, which is just along the way there, and the success of that. A number of those mid-tech companies that have relocated from Cambridge to the west of the city in high quality but more affordable space. We've identified 100,000 square metres of space for the expansion of Cambourne, potentially another further 6,000 jobs. So in respect of there being in the longer term an interplay between either end of the corridor, I wouldn't characterise it as being a singular direction of travel for people travelling into Cambridge solely to work. The University of Cambridge and its kind of associations is increasingly reaching into the Oxcam arc. Cambourne is ideally placed to form part of that network of locations where science and innovation can happen. And so I'd anticipate people leaving Cambridge to also travel westwards towards Bourne, towards Cambourne and its expanded areas as well.
Sorry, I wasn't quite specific enough with my question. So Mr. Littlewood here refers to the main sites identified for future housing in the Cambridge area, and he says he identifies sites that aren't located in the west of Cambridge, Cambridge Airport, 10,000 units, Waterbeach, Newtown, and Northstowe. Having regard to the policies that we've just looked at, which allocate Cambridge North for 13,000 potential new homes, is there anything you'd like to say in response to Mr. Littlewood's point that the main sites identified for future housing in Cambridge would not be served by the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme?
Certainly. I mean, it's not a criticism of Mr Littlewood's paragraph 3, because at the time the document had not been published, but there's clearly a substantial, in fact, the largest allocation in Greater Cambridge of Cambourne North to the west of Cambridge, served by this corridor, alongside Bourne Airfield and Cambourne North.
Thank you. So finally, on the emerging plan, some overall conclusions. So just overall, having regard to everything you've said and to these policies and the spatial strategy in the emerging plan, how important is the scheme to delivering the emerging local plan?
The evidence base suggests it's an essential part of the infrastructure necessary to deliver the plan, that evidence was published last month, and so in my view it is an essential piece of infrastructure to support continued growth, a sustainable development plan process.
And noting that some of the housing proposed in the Cambourne area will not come forward until later in the plan period or potentially after 2045, what is your basis for saying there is a need for the scheme now at the present day?
Well, as I've alluded to, one of the challenges is to make to give absolute clarity about what the infrastructure that people are going to be able to utilise will be, to set behaviours right at the beginning of the process. If people become used to travelling by car to go to a destination when they move, or that is one of the reasons for their choice, then it becomes harder to get them out of their car and to utilise public transport. The early delivery of infrastructure is important not only to relieve existing congestion that is experienced on that corridor, and that acts as a disincentive to people to work in Cambridge who approach it from the west, but also to improve the efficiency of the transport network. But I think it also sets expectations about the infrastructure that's going to be there to support both commercial investment, but also housing development, and the confidence that those investors can have around the deliverability of high quality homes and jobs.
And then just in terms of your conclusions on the alignment of the scheme with the emerging local plan, you dealt with this in relation to the first proposals at paragraphs 6.38 to 6.39 of your main proof. And you review that again in relation to the most recent emerging version at paragraphs 5.1 to 5.2 of your supplementary proof of evidence on pages 14 to 15. You note at the top of page 15, paragraph 5.2, your view remains that the scheme continues to comply with and support the overarching principles of the emerging plan. Is there anything you wish to add to that conclusion, or is that...
No, that's a fair summary of my position.
And very final topic, just a few questions on the overall planning balance and the various planning balances which you deal with in your main proof, paragraph 6.40 to 6.48. And you deal there with the heritage balance in the section starting at 6.42, Greenbelt very special circumstances from 6.44, and the overall planning balance from 6.47. We've made reference in your oral evidence to Mr. Sensical's further note on his planning evidence and Mr. Littlewood's response to that planning evidence. Have you had a chance to review those notes?
Yes.
And is there any change that you would like to make to your assessment of the planning balance on the basis of the content of those notes?
No. I mean, I continue to believe the planning balance points strongly in favour of the development. It provides a means to resolve the infrastructural requirements associated with the development plan. The council has assessed separately through its own team the environmental, heritage and associated impacts, and considered all of the evidence, and my conclusion on the planning balance therefore remains as outlined in the supplementary proof and my original proof.
And just for the avoidance of doubt, is there any change in your assessment of the planning balance as a result of the new version of the emerging local plan?
Well, recognising the limited weight that one can give to the plan, the benefits in unlocking growth in a way that is supports sustainable patterns of living are, in my view, increased as a consequence of the emerging local plan and the quantity of and ambitions for additional growth at Cambourne when compared with the original planning balance struck.
And based on what you've heard and seen regarding the evidence given by the other parties to this inquiry, can you just conclude by giving your view on whether consent for the draft order that's sought and deemed planning permission should be granted?
Well, my view remains as set out in my proof, and indeed as the councils have resolved in their submissions prior to my proof, that the delivery of the Cambourne to Cambridge project outlined has public benefits that significantly outweigh the adverse effects mitigated by the conditions recommended or being developed through the Statement of Common Ground to address those areas where there is potential and actual harm. So, in my view, consent should be granted for this project.
Thank you. Those are all my questions for you, Mr. Kelly, and thank you very much for bearing with me.
Thank you. Myself and Mr. Clay have got some questions, but I just want to check. Nobody's advised me that they want to, any other parties want to ask Mr. Kelly any questions, but can I just check to see if there are any requests?
Would it be possible to ask a question?
Could you introduce yourself and perhaps come? Can I just check? You have.
I haven't mentioned.
Apologies, I've seen a lot of people over the course of this inquiry. You have given evidence previously. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you were someone who'd given.
Yes,
evidence.
Indeed.
So if you can introduce yourself and ask.
Yes. So my name's Carolyn Postgate, and I'm a resident of Coton. And I just wanted to ask Mr. Kelly a simple question. Why do you think that the C2C scheme, as it's proposed, will serve the people of Cambourne and Bourne when it takes passengers to Grange Road, with onward journeys through congested streets to employment centres, biomedical campus, etc., and to schools and colleges?
I think there are several elements to the experience of people travelling from Cambourne to Cambridge, and some of those elements involve the experience within the city, and some of those elements will involve the experience to the city. At the moment, there are a number of factors that seem to be prejudicing the ability of residents of Cambourne to choose public transport as a mode of travel to the city. I, in fact, parked at Grange Road last night and walked into the city centre. It was merely a short walk. It took me less than 5 minutes to do so. Mind you, I was walking briskly. And so it's quite clear from the evidence received by the inquiry that I've heard that the intention is not to terminate buses at Grange Road.
Correct.
It is recognised that there are further measures necessary to enhance bus movement around the city. I think there is agreement around that. But part of the way of realising that is to reduce the number of private car trips into the city. You will be familiar with the City Access project that was abandoned, which sought to deliver a reduction in peak hour car trips on the city's road network. That project will have to be, was abandoned, but the Mayor's transport strategy is going to have to wrestle with the forecast growth in trips on the city network. one of the things that this project realises is the ability for people to make genuine choices on a reliable service between Cambourne and the city. What happens in the city, this scheme is not responsible for resolving, but the Mayor's transport strategy and indeed the highway authorities will need to address in the emerging transport strategy. So from my perspective, this scheme resolves a substantial issue between Cambourne and Cambridge. I've sat for many, many hours on Madingley Hill in queuing traffic, seeking to access the park and ride, ironically, at Madingley, in order to then mode shift to my bicycle on my daily trip to work. This scheme removes that potential impediment to access to the city. It doesn't resolve all of the city's transport issues, but the Mayor's transport strategy and indeed the wider objectives of ensuring that sustainable trips can be achieved means that that remains an endeavour for all the public authorities.
So your opinion of a bus lane on Madingley Hill for the last section wouldn't be just as good as the off-road part of the scheme?
I'm not here to give evidence on the alternative, but there are two elements, in my view, to the way in which people decide whether to take a different form of transport. The first is the actual lived experience in terms of empirical data. The second is their perceptions as to whether or not that trip will be accomplished reliably and consistently. People routinely choose the underground instead of buses, for example, in London, because of the concerns about congestion on buses. I'm not here to offer a view on CPPF's alternative proposals, but all I can state is that the objective sitting behind the local plan that we've rehearsed this morning is that public transport solutions are desirable, attractive and reliable so that people can choose them without the fear of unquantifiable delay and so forth. And in that respect, the alternative to connecting our settlements beyond the Greenbelt with significant and reliable public transport solutions would be that we would have to look at solutions on the edges of Cambridge that would not require public transport infrastructure to connect. As I explained earlier, we have exhausted those parts of the Greenbelt that do not that allow that to happen without further harm happening. So it's a series of choices that we have to make, the choice that the spatial strategy is making is to provide substantial portions of growth with fast connections to the city with reliable public transport solutions.
You do keep mentioning this word reliable, and I believe that there are alternatives available, not one particular one, but that are more designed to get people to where they need to go. You've mentioned parking in Grange Road. I don't know how you found a parking place, because I don't believe there is one usually. And plenty of people will cycle in, of course, along the new greenways, which kind of render the bicycle path alongside the proposed busway slightly redundant. But I take your point that reliability is a good thing, but I believe it can be.
Is there a question there?
Yes, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be
it's not for a
spending
discussion
time. No, absolutely. Yes, good. Thank you very much for allowing me.
Have you got any more questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Sorry again. I'll apologise. I've seen a lot of people doing this inquiry, and I can't remember whether you're somebody who's given evidence at the inquiry before.
I have written an evidence, yes. I would like to ask a question.
Well, I mean, normally the opportunity for questioning is for those who've taken an active role within the inquiry, rather than just for anyone to ask questions. So yeah, I think unlike Ms. Postgate, who's actually come before us and given evidence herself, I don't think it'd be appropriate if you haven't actually taken part in the inquiry, even though, as you say, you've provided some written comments on the proposal. Thank you. Myself and Mr. Clegg have got some questions. I think we'll just have a short break, though, if just because we've been going for some time. I make it 20 past 3. I think we'll just have a very short break. We'll just take a 10-minute break. So we'll return at 3:30. Thank you. I'll make it 3:30. It's time for the inquiry to resume. I've got a few questions for you, and I'm sure Mr. Clegg will as well. Just starting off on a couple of points I picked up during evidence, Mr. Kelly. I mean, you mentioned, I think, a couple of times how the council's sort of technical teams were involved in the project. Was there any changes to the C2C project as a result of the district and city councils' sort of technical assessments of the proposed scheme?
I think they've mostly manifested, bearing in mind the evolution of the scheme, they've mostly manifested in terms of the published scheme through the discussion around mitigation and the conditions. So the assessment of some of the information submitted initially led my officers to express a concern about particular elements potentially giving rise to matters of harm that through discussions have then been able to be resolved through the mitigation measures that have been identified within conditions. And the fundamental elements of that, I think, related to additional information that was provided to officers within the shared planning service and considered to provide clarity, really.
So if I understand that correctly, so what you're saying is that the technical input didn't actually affect the proposal, but it affected what you've subsequently agreed with the applicant in terms of conditions. Is that correct?
I think that's right. Yes, in terms of the original the settled proposal, there was then a series of discussions around specific impacts arising from it. Additional information was provided that allowed us to settle on conditions, either to cement those details or to require further details prior to commencement of the project. So things such as I think in the conditions, matters around the location of spoil, the design of specific elements of the scheme which are reserved through those conditions, have allowed us to reach a satisfactory conclusion on the merits of the proposals.
And again, in relation to Ms. Postgate's question, you made it clear that your evidence didn't cover the alternative route. But can I just so that I sort of understand it, was there any assessment from the council's technical teams on the CPPF's alternative route?
No.
You've referred a number of occasions to super connectivity. Can you just clarify what you mean by that? Is that purely in transport terms, or is it a wider phrase?
I'm sorry if I've kind of abused some kind of term of art, but effectively, what I mean by that is that an innovation ecosystem, which is what exists in Cambridge, exists on the ability of people to meet one another, talk through problems quickly and resolve them. Both on a personal level, but on an institutional level, the connectivity between the parks, the various science locations, the innovation locations, and the personnel within them is an important part of what makes Cambridge's economy special. And we have, if you were to look a map of Greater Cambridge, we have something like 21 science parks dispersed in the Greater Cambridge area, and a number of them to the south, but also within the city, and increasingly in sites to the north and to the west. We're seeing spin-out companies move from small locations to perhaps more affordable locations further afield, like Bourne Quarter, but we're also seeing, and we're told, that connectivity between people and institutions, both academic and commercial, and public services such as the health the health institutions, notably clustered on the biomedical campus, is a critical part of the economic growth that the area has been able to achieve, and the ambitions for the future economic growth that it will achieve.
So if I understood you correctly, the phrase super connectivity is a description of activities that take place between people and institutions within Cambridge.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a particular transport objective or a particular internet
I think
objective or
I'd say it's facilitated by the transport infrastructure, because unlike many other forms, we are consistently told that it's about interactions face-to-face between people, of which obviously transport plays a central role, as compared with, for example, digital technologies that, Teams and so forth. Cambridge is a highly connected place in terms of bodies, groups, institutions, and the individuals and professors and so forth that sit within it. And that means that people come together frequently and in different forums as part of the way in which the city has been able to grow. It certainly and create its innovation systems. So people emphasise to me time and time again the importance of people meeting people as part of that economic and creative ecosystem.
Thank you. The next thing I want to ask was in terms of transport modelling. How does the transport modelling that's been undertaken in terms of the review of the evidence base for the new local plan relate to that which the applicant relies on in their application? Is it the same? Are they different?
It uses the transport modelling that we have done. The County Council are in the process of replacing and validating a new transport model. But for the purposes of our local plan, the evidence utilised the Series F transport model for some bespoke runs related to growth locations identified in the. So we did our own transport modelling to test the growth scenarios back in at the first proposal stage, and identify a number of. There was 8 growth scenarios that we modelled. They are extremes, but they help to highlight the stress points on the network. And then as part of the evidence base of the most recent, that helped to inform the blended strategy. The most recent publication last month included the evidence of transport model runs done to validate the allocation of or assess the proposed allocation of Cambourne North and Grange Farm. They were undertaken on the existing transport model, which I know has been debated at some length.
Sorry, when you say the existing transport
The
model,
Series F.
the Series F.
CSRM.
And sorry, you said you developed your own transport model for particular scenarios.
So,
Can
sorry.
you just say more about that? But was that using the Series F as a base?
Yes, at the early stage of the local plan, we published a series of spatial options that identified, for example, concentrating all of the growth in the centre of Cambridge, looking only at perimeter-based, and we distributed all of the growth to those locations to be able to help us to determine the different consequences for transport modelling. It wasn't a bespoke model, it was through the County Council using the CSRM, but they were specific runs for our purposes, for the purposes of testing the local plan. As I said, for the latest publication, we commissioned the County Council to do specific model runs based upon the assumptions of settlements at Grange Farm and Cambourne North, and a series of specific intervention infrastructure assumptions underpinned that, including East West Rail. and Cambourne to Cambridge for Cambourne North.
And just on the issue of modelling, when in your supplementary proof, I think you refer to the when you're talking about the busway integration report that was discussed in your evidence in chief. I think that says that that report identified some issues, and I think that was it was phrased that it in the terms of strategic highway modelling has identified issues. And again, I just wanted to sort of confirm what the modelling was that the integration report was based on.
I'd need to confirm it, but I think it's on the modelling that we undertook because there's been a separate commission with Arabs that informed some of the work around Cambourne, so I couldn't be sure to say it's the same model run that the council has published in its broader evidence base, but we have used the CSRM to test the implications of Cambourne North. I'd have to advise you on whether that is the model referred to in the busway integration report.
And again, I think just going back to your main proof, I think it's at paragraph 5.3, if I've got my references correct. No, I'm very sorry. I meant your supplementary proof, 5.3. Apologies. I haven't made it clear in my notes there. And again, you talk there about proposals comprising part of the baseline infrastructure assumed within the original and subsequent transport modelling that accompanies the joint local plan. What do you mean by original and subsequent transport modelling?
Sorry, just bear with me. I'm just looking for
Sure.
that proof. Did you say 5.3?
5.3 in your supplementary proof, yes.
Yeah, so in the I think in the Series F model that was originally used to inform the local plan work, there are a series of baseline assumptions for the purposes of the, in terms of the infrastructure, and I'd need to, I think I've got an indication of what those were in the Series F model. I don't have the transport model in front of me. For the purposes of our assessment of the Cambourne North project, in addition to the baseline assumptions that are in Series F about infrastructure, there were a series of additional pieces of infrastructure that were assumed to form part of the infrastructure used to assign trips through the CSRM model. And so what I was trying to highlight, that in both of those scenarios, the Cambourne to Cambridge project and a proxy for it in modelling terms was used in both the original CSRM Series F, but also the subsequent modelling that is contained in the report that we published last month alongside the evidence base for the local plan. But the most recent report includes the East-West Rail project as well. Sorry, if I could find the...
So again, just so I understand that correctly, so in terms of your reference to original transport modelling, that would be the Series F model, and
yes.
The subsequent transport modelling is where you've added in these additional infrastructure assumptions, one of which is East-West Rail.
That's correct.
Just following on from that point, Mr. Kelly, precisely what stage was the subsequent modelling involved where you added in these extra considerations?
Sorry, can you?
I just want to be clear about when the subsequent modelling came into effect, where you extended the Series F by taking account of other considerations. Is it
So this
simply
was
in connection with the version of the local plan which we now have?
this is the local plan. Yeah,
Yes.
to underpin the local plan. It's
Yeah.
not, and in fact, the report was only concluded in September as we were heading towards publication of the local plan itself. So it's subsequent to, I think, anything that will be here.
Subsequent to the local plan?
So we published a suite of evidence alongside
Yes.
the Reg 18 local plan. One of those documents that we've published is a report produced as following the modelling undertaken on the CSRM of the Cambourne North proposals. That report, I believe, was published in September 2025. Or was concluded in September 2025 towards the end, and has been published as part of the local plan evidence base.
And does that include the latest considerations in respect of modelling?
That includes, because I think the CSRM Series F does not or may not include East West Rail. Sorry, can I just refer to the report, because I think I've got a copy of it in my
Yes.
in my bag. So this is a piece of local plan evidence.
Yes.
Report from Cambridgeshire County Council, October 2025. And within that, it includes the outcomes from the investigation by the County Council through the CSRM model of the Cambourne North proposals.
Yes.
What it highlights in that report, it identifies the baseline, the model runs that were coded into the CSRM2 F series baseline. These schemes, which are not part of any local plan mitigation package, are as follows, and it lists Cambourne to Cambridge. It then says, in addition to the baseline schemes, the model runs reported in this section include the same transport schemes as the 2041 preferred options, full build out, which is the former local plan, first proposals, and additional measures, which includes a suite of things, Cambridge Eastern Access Phase B and so forth, modal filter at the bridge over Coldham's Lane, shuttle bus, but it then includes East West Rail, including a station at Cambourne in the land north of Cambourne zone.
Yes.
So this report, which accompanies the local plan from October
Yes.
25, includes both Cambourne to Cambridge and East West Rail.
And that is part of the evidence base.
And that's the
For
evidence
where you're
base
up to now.
to the local plan right now,
Right.
and identifies in its conclusions, and I think that's what I was trying to summarise, that both East West Rail and the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme are necessary in order to deliver that allocation.
Thanks.
Just moving on to some of the allocations in the emerging plan. One of the in terms of the Bourne airfield allocation, I think is S/BA, and one of I noticed that there's requirements in there about talking about delivering high quality landscape setting around the boundary of the settlement. To the south of the A428. One of the criticisms that's been levelled by interested parties about the scheme is the fact that the route of the off-road route follows both the northern and then the part of the western boundary of the Bourne Airfield sort of village site. Is there any sort of conflict with with that particularly routing, specifically about the approach to the landscape setting around the boundary, but also again another criticism was about the accessibility of the route, bearing in mind that it sort of goes around a peripheral route rather than through the centre of what would be the Bourne village. So sorry, that was a long way of asking whether is there a potential conflict between what the emerging policy is saying, both in terms of landscaping and accessibility, and the route that's being proposed?
And just to put with that, Mr. Kelly, was any thought at all given during the consideration of the application to a different alignment through Bourne Airfield?
So one of the practical implications of developing new settlements is that you have to have regard to how they will be built. That includes the disruption caused by, for example, haul routes, the construction of various other infrastructure that sits alongside it. For Bourne Airfield, we undertook a design coding exercise that sits hand in glove with the parameter plans for the scheme. And what the parameter plans, which I think are some of the core documents, what they highlight is how the transport network, with the network of roads within Bourne Airfield, interface with the Cambourne to Cambridge project. Clearly, there are trade-offs in terms of journey time, for example, and the reliability of a dedicated route with the reliance of stretches of on-road running. And there are also practical issues about running a busway through the middle of a development, which is ongoing in terms of the practical catchments. The discussions that we've had with the new owners of Bourne Airfield highlight that certainly their intentions appear to be to build from the busway downwards into the site. That has the benefit of being able to separate construction, traffic and so forth with the new residents' homes that you're trying to sell, importantly, but also trying to get to use public transport solutions. So I think early on in the process, and I've noted the criticism that people suggest maybe the road should have greater penetration. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at the parameter plans for Bourne Airfield, you'll see how the two identified in the planning permission of that time, high quality public transport stops to the eastern end and the western end of the Bourne Airfield site, corresponding with where the town centre or the local district centre is within Bourne, are then connected with the movement framework for the rest of the settlement, such that it might not be the same vehicle that takes you into the heart of the community, but it interfaces with the high-quality public transport buses running along the Cambourne to Cambridge route. And clearly, I recognise there's been some discussions around the various technologies and the ability of those vehicles to run on routes other than the guided busway. So, recognising the time of the planning application, I think the approved planning permission and the parameters, but also the interface with the dedicated route for the Cambourne to Cambridge busway through Bourne Airfield means that there is an optimised integration with future new homes and the supporting infrastructure for them and the current proposals. In terms of the landscaping, your point around landscaping, it's often difficult at the kind of scale of these new settlements to envisage, but there is a part of the proposals in the Bourne Airfield planning application are to properly integrate infrastructure like this into into the landscape, into the kind of future landscape being created for the site, recognising that one of the other parameters for the busway is to try and minimise the number of people who have to cross it frequently when on its running line. So it doesn't run through public open space, for example, identified within the scheme, and so forth.
Thank you. Just on a more detailed point, I noticed in terms of the plan that accompanied policy SWC, which is the West Cambridge allocation in the emerging plan, actually indicated a route for a busway which links, effectively goes from the end of Charles Babbage Road to the M11. So I'm making the assumption that that is the C2C route. I was just questioning why that's shown on that plan, but I don't think to, unless I've sort of misread other plans, I don't think the actual route of the C2C is shown on other allocations. It is.
Sorry, sir, can I just have a look at that plan in order to be able to comment?
Sorry, it's CD 29 71.3. And it's on PDF page 141.
Okay, thank you.
It may well be that you'll point me to another plan and say, yes, we've done the same on all of them. But from my look at it, I couldn't see that.
And this is the hatched dotted line, is that the point that you're making?
Yeah, I think it stood out because as it goes from the end of Charles Babbage Road to the M11, I was assuming, I can't come wrong, that it was effectively picking up the proposed route of the C2C. Because
it is.
My question was, I don't. Why is it shown on that plan and not on other plans?
I can't answer that question, to be honest. I mean, I would suggest that it's just the person drafting that version of the or that part of the plan thought to include it as a particular matter within there, but I can't explain why it's not been included on the other site allocations. If you're saying it's missing,
well, it could be that I've misread the other plans or not spotted something. I didn't know whether it was in terms of sort of safeguarding a route, or whether it was purely just an indicative route.
Well, there's probably an element of both. The planning permission for West Cambridge does specifically identify the route through that site. And I suspect that the artist, in the case of putting this plan together, has sought to capture that within this site allocation as shown. But I would have to go back to my team and ask them why we haven't shown it in any other rendering.
Perhaps I could just jump in here and say if you look at the figures, I'll get the references for you, sir, but if you look at the figures for the Cambourne North and Cambourne policies and the Bourne Airfield policy, you'll see a similar
in which
corridor
case,
identified in that
I
hash.
apologise, I've obviously misread those.
It's
those plans.
the figures which are associated with those policies which have a similar sort of dotted line. Just looking at Bourne Airfield, that's on page 72 of CD 29 71 4, and you can see the safeguarded high quality public transport corridor marked out there, and there's a similar corridor marked for the Cambourne policies as well. Do you see that?
I haven't got it in front.
Okay.
I'll take the word for it if I've misread those plans. So apologies for.
I can
going
get
down
the references for you.
Just got a couple more questions. And again, I think you were taking to this in evidence in chief, but in terms of the draft, actually no, apology. I think I've got that one's been answered. Just one more question. On a couple of occasions, you referred to the need for public transport solutions generally, and specifically in relation to the C2C being a distinctive and defined public transport solution. Can you just say a bit more about what you mean by that? Is that specific by distinctive and defined? Do you mean it has to be a busway, or are you talking more about how vehicles are liveried, or how they're managed or promoted? What did you mean?
I suppose so. What I was trying to convey is that, for example, the existing guided busway has a very strong part of the consciousness of people in Cambridgeshire of the public transport infrastructure, in a way that perhaps just on-road running of buses is not manifest. So people can identify with the busway from Northstowe to Cambridge as a very distinct piece of infrastructure, and the Cambourne to Cambridge proposals, in many respects, sit similarly in the fact that they have a clear they can be they're identifiable as pieces of infrastructure. And I suppose my point was that in the context of trying to get people to understand that there are transport solutions that will have greater reliability and offer something different to conventional bus routes, Cambourne to Cambridge, alongside the Northstowe busway, the Waterbeach proposed busway, the South East Cambridge busway, are more tangible as a distinct high-quality public transport offering.
And what aspects of it make it like that? Is it just the fact that it's a guided busway, or is it the route, or?
I think it's the certainly in my mind, and of course there'll be different views about this, but it's the fact that that what you have is a deliberate and bus only route that conveys people from Cambourne or the Cambourne corridor past the congested sections of the approaches into Cambridge to the city. So in what you'll also see in the south of the city around the biomedical campus is sections of busway which effectively shortcut or take a different route to conventional road and on-traffic running, which is traditionally quite congested, especially around the peak hours.
Thank you. And you did mention that sort of that was your view. Is your view sort of supported by any research or information that's been assessment that's been carried out about the role of something that's sort of being defined and distinctive, or is that just a general view?
It's my general view, but Cambridge Ahead have in fact recently published a report. It's not before the inquiry, but have recently published a report which highlights the connectivity provided by the Northstowe busway as an important part of the infrastructure that supported Cambridge's faster rates of economic growth. As I said, it's not before the examination, but it was published by Cambridge Ahead, I think, in September this year. Cambridge Ahead are a representative organisation on behalf of the kind of business and interests in the city, and they undertake a series of evidential studies. So it's not a piece of work that I have put forward, and it's not with you. But
thank you. That's all the questions I had, Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly, just a few questions from me for you. First of all, just some points of clarification about the version of the emerging local plan which we now have. I just want to understand how it works. By way of example, I'm looking at the policy for Cambourne North, which starts on PDF page 5. I think it's a CD 29/71/4. I just want to understand what the extent of the policies as opposed to other supporting text because of the way it's displayed. Am I right in thinking that in this case, it's the text from pages 5 to 16 inclusive?
So, bear with me. Yes, that's correct, sir. So the supporting information is what we might call reason justification,
Yeah.
and kind of
Yes.
old school.
Often policies appear in a different colour in
Yes.
a box or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah. And presumably that format follows through.
Yes, yeah. So there's a standard pattern in which
Yeah.
there is the policy, and then the supporting information
Yeah.
is lowercase policy, effectively.
Thank you. And the plan period for the emerging local plan, is that 2017 to 2040?
No, the emerging plan, because of the requirements and the anticipated timeline, runs from 2024 to 2045.
Right.
And that has 2024 to 2045, and that has changed from the first proposals where we were looking at a period to 2041. So as a consequence of the delay and the anticipated local plan timetable, we've moved the plan period on by 4 years.
So it was previously 2024 to 41?
2020 to 41.
Right. Okay. Within the section of the local plan that we've been looking at, you have a site plan showing the area of Cambourne North. There's also reference in the first part of the policy to the site allocation boundary being shown on the policies map. Now, I presume that the plans contained in the document we've got are the same as on the policies map, and there's no need for us to seek copies of those, but I just want to make absolutely certain that's the case.
Yes, I will confirm that. There are some slight, obviously, there may well be a very slight drafting issue between the two documents, but the objective is that they are.
But they reflect what.
They reflect what's on the site allocations, absolutely.
Yeah. And is that the same approach that's been taken with regard to the existing local plan as well? Because again, there are certain plans there that show site boundaries, but there's also reference to, I think there's reference to both a proposals map and the policies map.
Yes.
I presume that they are consistent.
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
The only point I would make is that the policies maps include some of the landscape designations and so forth, rather than purely just the site allocations,
Yes.
of course.
But in terms of the major sites that we've been talking about,
Yes.
they should be the same. And I won't try and recollect the plan period for the existing local plans, but I'll just ask you what they are.
2031 was the
End date.
End date, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And the start date.
I think it was could be 2011, but let me.
That's what I think it is. 2011 to 2031.
I think that was the period. Yeah.
Yeah. In your proof now, I want to go to page 19 and paragraph 430. And it's the reference to the East-West Railway. And you talk there at the beginning of that paragraph about confirmation of the preferred alignment. And I think you were careful to say that the scheme hadn't yet been approved in evidence earlier today. Given that, and given some of the arguments that have been deployed by the applicant at this inquiry, how certain are you, how confident are you about using the phrase in terms of confirmation of the alignment?
Well, there has been a statement around a preferred alignment. Obviously, the East West Rail project has been through a number of iterations in terms of consultation phases. We have been engaging extensively through a planning performance agreement with East West Rail company in the development of our local plan. Indeed, in concert with an understanding about where their emerging scheme design places that railway and indeed the station. The council made representations to the last formal consultation on East West Rail around a number of matters, including the location, the precise location of the station, but we have supported the route alignment and the engagement with East West Rail, which is anticipated to result in a further round of formal consultation in the spring next year, gives an indication that that alignment is not, as far as we have been advised, likely to change. There is an ongoing conversation about the precise position of the station along the railway line on the north side of Cambourne, but alongside the allocation of £2.5 billion by the Treasury to the progression of that project through to development consent order, I think it's going through. We believe and we are still confident that the East-West Rail alignment firstly runs to the north of Cambourne, secondly runs in proximity to the published alignment and indeed the way that we've reflected it in the North Cambourne allocation.
Thank you. Just staying with East-West Rail and moving on to page 24 and the first bullet point. I just thought it would be helpful if you could clarify destinations from Cambourne using East-West Rail. You start off at the beginning of that bullet point talking about East-West Rail providing direct access into Cambridge city centre, but you then go on to say that it wouldn't offer a superior alternative to trips for workers into the city centre. So you seem to be saying two rather different things in the same, and I just wondered what your actual position was.
So the geography of Cambridge city centre is that the railway station is not in the city centre, and so East West Rail will take you. It will take into the historic city centre. East West Rail will take you via the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and the railway station that's being constructed at the moment to Cambridge South, and then from there to Cambridge Central Station, which is located in an area called CB1, so the Central Business District.
Yeah.
The centre of Cambridge, the city centre of Cambridge, so the retail centre of Cambridge is not at CB1. It is approximately half a mile away, centred on the Market Square and the Grand Arcade. And I suppose my point is that the colleges, the university colleges, are all related into the city centre, not at CB1. So there are different, in some respects, there is no railway line into the city centre. There is a railway line to Cambridge Central.
That's what you seem to be saying, that the train will go to the city centre in the third and fourth lines of that bullet point.
I'm sorry, yes, you're right. It's perhaps too general a phrase, but fundamentally, if you follow Madingley Road or you follow Grange Road, you then emerge onto Queen's Road and then into
I'm familiar with the route.
So if you're familiar, so you're
and I'm familiar with the station.
Fantastic.
And the different parts of the city centre.
Yes. So my point was that there are different areas served, and that in some respects the bus route from Cambourne, if you wanted to go into the city centre as opposed to CB1, is arguably more direct as a mode of transport than into Cambridge Central Station and then either taking a taxi or walking, or alternatively picking up a bus to travel to what we would associate with the retail and service offer and colleges in the city centre.
Right. But would CB1 be more appropriate in terms of employment?
Not necessarily. The university and colleges employ a substantial number of people in the city centre alongside all of the service sector in retailing and the hospitality sector. So I wouldn't necessarily conclude that CB1 is a bigger employment location than the city centre. I can go away and check the figures if that's helpful, but I think it's where you draw the boundaries
Yes.
between the two.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Kelly.
Can I just check to see whether you've got any questions in re-examination?
I don't have any re-examination, but I just wanted to draw out a couple of references just arising from what Mr. Kelly has said in response to questions from you, from both of you. And that was just, first of all, the two statements of case submitted on behalf of the councils. And this was in response to a question from you, Mr. Underwood, regarding the approach to technical evidence and conditions. And I would say both of those documents really set out the council's approach to the technical evidence in more detail than Mr. Kelly's proof of evidence does, because things had moved on by the time we got to the proof of evidence stage. But in particular, if you would like to look at section 19 of CD 2316.1, which is on pages 38 to 41, that sets out the conditions that the council was proposing at that stage. So I think that's South Cambridgeshire statement of case. And then the other statement of case, CD 2316.2, section 17, does the same exercise on pages 36 to 39, again, just setting out the conditions that the council was proposing in relation to Cambridge. So that should hopefully assist in terms of the approach taken to the applications and conditions. Then Mr. Kelly mentioned the parameter plan for Bourne Airfield on access and movement. That's at CD 404.4. In case you'd like to look at that, I think he made the points that he wished to make on that plan, but just for the reference to that. And then finally, in terms of the figures, which show the plans for movement strategy and other things in relation to Cambourne North and Bourne Airfield in the latest version of the emerging local plan. They are at CD 2917.4 on pages 16 and pages 72, and they show the dotted line with a little bus image on it showing the route of the busway.
Thank you, I'm grateful for that. And yes, much embarrassment. As soon as Mr. Clegg pulled up a picture, I could see it straight away. So apologies for any sort of wild goose chases there. Can I just clarify? You're referring me to the conditions in the statement of case. Was that in relation to what Mr. Kelly said, that basically there'd been an evolution between that and what's in the statement of common ground, whereby concerns were picked up in conditions?
It was in relation to your question about any changes that had been made to the scheme and whether they were dealt with through engagement with the councils or through conditions. And I was just drawing attention to where the council's case on conditions was set out.
Thank you. That's helpful. Sorry. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Kelly. I've just got a few procedural things I just want to touch on before we adjourn today. I'm conscious that but behind the scenes I know the applicant and both Mrs. Vincent and Mrs. Taplin have been carrying out discussions about site visits and so on. It was just mentioned to me, I think there was a question in terms of our site visits as to whether going to Bourne Airfield would be possible just with the permission of the landowner, but I've been advised that because of HGV movements and other potential hazards, it would be much more appropriate to do that as an accompanied site visit to make sure sort of safety. So that's just something I've been advised about.
We wouldn't want you to be unsafe, so.
I appreciate your concern for my safety. And in terms of some other things, at the start of today, Mr. Cameron, you mentioned your approach to the ES Addendum 3. Myself and Mr. Clegg initially said that because of it was sort of interlinked with Claire Hall's sort of withdrawn evidence, that we didn't think it appropriate, but you suggested that actually it might be appropriate to provide a version which doesn't make any reference to Claire Hall. And having discussed that with Mr. Clegg, I think that probably would be an appropriate approach. So I think so. What we won't do is obviously we won't accept the addendum as it's been provided, but if you could provide effectively an edited version of it, which means it can be read as a standalone document, I think that would be appropriate.
I'm going to put my head above the parapet and say we'll do it by the end of the week.
Thank you.
That'll be, if I haven't got a head by the time I come back, you'll know what's happened.
Thank you. Also, again this morning, just talking about the local plan and extracts. I think, as we found today, it's relatively easy to find the particular points that we need to look at. So I don't think we will ask for extracts. And as Mr. Cameron pointed out, we could end up with being inundated with extracts if Mr. Sensicle's got a number to refer to as well. But perhaps what might be helpful is just a ready reckoner or just a short schedule, perhaps just picking out the extracts from Mr. Kelly's reference, just so that we've got an easy reference of actually finding the particular parts that are referred to in people's evidence. And perhaps if I could extend that request to the applicant, to Mr. Sensicle as well, just literally a sort of page number, PDF page number for the particular.
Yeah,
points.
I think what we need is a list of the policies in the two local plans and the latest version of the emerging local plan as well. So there's no dispute at all about which policies the parties consider irrelevant.
So that's in the two adopted local plans and the most up-to-date, putative Regulation 18 if signed off by the Cabinet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. And talking about sign-off by cabinets, again, just a reminder, it'd be very helpful if we can get information as soon as possible after the joint meeting on the 25th. One, what the decision of the two councils is, and two, whether there's anything different in terms of whether they've not accepted parts of the plan or there's some particular recommendations.
Certainly, sir. Yep.
And that'd be very helpful. I think in terms of the various documents, that's all I wanted to mention.
Sir, can I just check on documents? Sorry. There was a question about ratios of employment to housing in the emerging local plan in this version. Would a note on those assist?
What was your
It was, yes, sir. Yeah. I'm not sure whether we need another note. I wanted to understand the principle of the relationship between job numbers and housing numbers, and I think Mr. Kelly explained that. He also explained it also became apparent that it varied depending what area you were looking at. So I think the note stands a risk of getting
very
enlarged to cover all the permutations that there are. I think as long as we know that there is a relationship and that it depends on various factors, I think that's probably sufficient as things stand.
I'm grateful.
I think that's all the additional things I wanted to mention. Just another thing, just in terms of venues, I think originally, because there wasn't availability of space in this venue, we were due to spend the last day of the public inquiry at the South Cambridgeshire District Council offices. I've been advised that actually there is now space available within this venue, and I think it'd be more appropriate, particularly because we've obviously got all the AV equipment already already set up here. If we're able to remain in this venue, we'll do so. So I think that's the that's the intention. Unless anyone's saying there's an issue with that. Okay. In that case, can I just double check to see if there's anything else that everybody wants to raise before I adjourn for the day? In that case, we'll resume on Tuesday the 11th. The programme says 9:30, and I think we will stick with 9:30 as a resumption time, because we probably will be taking a break, obviously around 11 o'clock, given it's the 11th of November. So I think that would just mean we're not sort of stopping and starting too much. So in that case, thank you very much. The inquiry is now resumed and adjourned. Yes, resumed. Yeah, I'm already in next week. We're now adjourned, and whilst me and Mr. Clegg will be doing some site visits, I'll see everybody on the 11th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.